activity is part of the follow-up to the commitments made at the recent annual seminar on national accounts organized by ECLAC at the beginning of November, and also the activities that ECLAC and UNSD have been carrying out to support the countries in the implementation and updating of the system of national accounts, such as the webinars that we have been holding this year. This workshop is focused on the tool that was presented at the annual seminar for balancing supply and use tables, which has sparked great interest among the participants. Yesterday, we presented this workshop to 14 Spanish-speaking countries, and today will be of the participants of 14 Caribbean countries and from UN regional commissions and international agencies. We now invite a delegate from each country and from the international organizations that are participating with us today to introduce themselves and their expectation of this workshop. We will first go through the countries in alphabetical order and then invite the representatives of the organizations. For the best development of this event, we kindly request you to keep the cameras and microphones turned off, and if you have any questions or comments, please post them on the chat. So let's go to our list of participants. We have delegates from Antigua and Barbuda, and if one of you is here now, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello, good morning. My name is Marissa Scott, and I'm a statistician here at the Antigua and Barbuda Statistics Division. And my expectation is to find out more about this supply and use tables balancing tool and find out what it's all about. Thank you.
Thank you, Marissa, and thank you for being here today. We also have from Aruba participants today, but I don't know if they are here right now.
Yes, Jonathan Upegi is here from Aruba. I have another colleague in the same room. We're on screen. That's why we don't have the video on.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan and colleagues from Aruba for being here. Now, Bahamas is here also.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Clarice Tonquist with the Department of Statistics here in the Bahamas, a part of the National Accounts and the Business Establishment section, and I hope to also gain a lot of knowledge from this SUT tool.
Thank you, Clarice and Bahama colleagues. From Belize, someone wants to come in? Maybe they are not here right now. Okay, from Bonaire, Henk?
Yes,
I saw you.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is Henk van der Velde. I'm the advisor on our small office on Bonaire, and I'm also interested to hear how we can implement something with supply and use tables. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you, Henk. From British Virgin Islands, someone want to come in? Maybe they are not here right now. So let's go to Curacao, to Cayman Island. From Cayman Island is here Danadira.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Dainadira Martis from Curacao, Central Bureau of Statistics. Looking forward how we can use this tool to provide our country with their supply and use table, since we haven't been able to do that for quite some time.
Excellent, Anira. Welcome. From Curacao, from Curacao, yes. Oh, no, sorry. From Cayman Island is Selborne. Christian here, or not? Let's see. From Dominica? Someone from Dominica would like to come in? Okay, let's go to Granada. From Granada, I can see if they are here, but they have registered at this meeting. From Jamaica.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Paula Jackson. I have two team members with me on the call also. So from this meeting, looking forward to hearing more about the tool, because when we did our last supply and use table, it was more of a manual balancing that we did. Nearer to the end, we tried with the RAS, but it seems as if maybe we didn't know how to use it properly. So there was some throwing out of the estimates. So I'm looking forward to see and learn more about this tool.
Thank you, Paula, and thank you for all the Jamaican colleagues. From St. Vincent and the Grenadines?
Hi, good morning. Hello, good morning. Wesley Dowers, statistician, Central Statistical Office. My objective and expectation is to just further cement and sustain my experience and knowledge with regards to the SUTs, whether being exposed to it before, and with the tool also, but just we are glad to have further expectations, further exposure to the tool and from a different perspective and so on. So in that regard, that'll be my objective for the training and workshop.
Excellent, Wesley. Welcome. From Suriname?
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
My name is Marjorika Sanraji from the National Accounts Division of General Bureau of Statistics Suriname. I'm joining this meeting to learn more about the tools of balancing the supply and use table. Thank you.
Thank you, Marjorie. And thank you for all the participants from Suriname. From Trinidad and Tobago? From Trinidad? Someone?
I don't see a participant from Trinidad.
Okay, thank you, Paula. From Turks and Caicos? They are not here also, Shirley or Sabrina?
No, I don't see them either.
Okay, thank you, Paula. From the international organizations, just from ESQA, from SA. Are they here now? From FEO?
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Sorry, we were two from ECE. This is the Regional Commission for Europe. And we have quite a few activities where we are helping some of our countries in technical assistance projects to improve their supply and use tables. And we've been recommending different softwares and tools for supply and use tables. And that's why we are interested to see this balancing tool. And eventually we may also present it next year. And excellent. That was my colleague. Maybe he has to add something. Sorry.
No worry.
No, thanks for that was everything, Tiamira. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you for being here. From FEO? Are they here now?
I don't see them.
Okay. And from ESQA? Okay. And then Martin Poveda is here? No. Okay. If there are participants that they would like to come in, please, this is the moment.
Thank you, Paula. I am Benson Tyson from the Central Statistics Office in BVI. Today, we have a second participant from BVI, Casey Fret, and we are here to learn about this tool. We don't have an active SUT running now in the BVI, and it will be interesting to understand just how it works and see how later we may be able to incorporate or update an SUT. I think that was done since in 1995, but it has not been in actual use. So anything to do with SUT, the CSO BVI is interested in understanding how it works and to see how we can incorporate it. Thank you very much.
Excellent, Benson. Thank you. Anyone else that would like to present his or herself? So, if there are no more presentations, let's move on to the presentation on the basics on the concepts behind the supplies and use tables that is in charge of ECLAC from of our colleague Janina Lopez, who is working in the National Account Statistics of our division. The floor is yours, Janina.
Thank you, Claudia. Hi, everyone. I am Janina Lopez from ECLAC, and I'm going to present the theoretical framework of a supply and use table. In this presentation, we are going to make a reminder of what, why, and how the supply are compiled and used. The sequence of account describe the working of economy with particular emphasis on how income is generated, distributed, redistributed, and used for consumption or the acquisition of assets, and when assets are disposed, that sequence is also known by you and without leaving aside the balance sheet accounts. Within the national account, an alternative is to be focused more on the production and consumption process rather than in the income procedure. If we analyze this above mentioned, we can answer the question about where the product come from and how they are used. We finally realize why SUT is useful. The answer to this question is the process of goods and services account that the National Account Central Framework shows us. Within the system, we took the definition of the production as a starting point to be measured. The central nucleus of the economic circuit is constituted by the production of goods and services, as the manual tells us, because the production leads to the goods and services that circulate in the economy. This is the result of the combination of different factors that intervene in the capital, labor, and the government work process, because the production leads to the income circulating in the economy. This part of what the manual tells us and leads to the analyze how the GDP is measured from three approaches that are one of the main aggregates of national accounts in the framework of goods and services accounts that make reference to the question of what and who produce them and how they are distributed. So when we talk about the GDP output approach, we all know that we took the production process of raw material without its intermediate consumption that intervene in the process to generate what is known as value added within all the economic activities where this is measured, plus the taxes except subsidized on products. In terms of the expenditure,
Janina, I'm sorry, maybe you can share the whole screen, and in display settings you need to select I'm sorry, get there,
select
yes.
the screen. We see
the duplicate slideshow. Okay,
this,
yes, duplicate. Okay,
there.
excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. In terms of the expenditure approach, the GDP is the sum of the final consumption of household and government, plus a gross capital formation component of gross fixed capital formation and change inventories, plus external commercial balance that is composed of export less import. In terms of income approach, we can see how the value added is distributed among the different agents, where GDP is the sum of the compensation of employee plus taxes on production and imports, plus gross operating surplus and mixed income. We are going to focus on the first two approaches, the output and expenditure GDPs. The first equation is already explained, and the second one, we can generate a macroeconomic identity, saying that the production GDP is the same that gross production value less the intermediate consumption, and this is equivalent to the expenditure GDP. If we reorganize the equation, on the one hand, we obtain the supply and the other, the use. With this final equation, we are creating a balance between supply and demand. So now, when we are talking about quantities, let us consider an example where the quantity of a product available in the economy is 100, and we say that of those 100, domestic production is 80 and import are 20. I have the totality of my supply, domestic product in the production 80 and import 20. That the same quantity must be reflected in the demand. Therefore, we are going to say that it is distributed considering 15 in intermediate goods, 42 in household final consumption goods, 3 in government final consumption goods, 5 in investment, and 35 in export. This is what is known as the flow of product or the flow of goods. And in this case, it's very easy to see that because I have only one product and because I can make that balance between supply and demand by saying who produces, if it's a product of the domestic economy or if it is an import, and how the demand is distributed at a detailed level. However, the design is that we can do the same at aggregate level. For the total economy, So based on the same principle in the production process is recorded with a more detailed dimension by economy, by economic activity, or by industry, both production and intermediate consumption, then they will be expressed in the same level. So what I'm reflecting here is how to keep this balance in a matrix scheme for the total economy, where I have the dimension for activity 1 that describes how many products that the activity can produce, 1, 2, 3, up to M. Activity 2, the same, how much it could produce, and so on up to activity M. And with this first blue square, I get the production matrix, where in the diagonal you have the main production, and around it, the secondary production. The next vector contains the import, where at the horizontal level I have the product. With this, then we obtain the total supply that considers a part of internal production and external production vector. On the demand side, we are going to have the column, the activity, and in row, the input needed for that process, such as raw material, and that quadrant is the one known as intermediate consumption. The additional vector that are classified at the level of each of the product will be for household, consumption, government, gross fixed capital formation, change in inventories, export, and import. From the demand side, this makes it possible to dimension to the totality of products and services circulating in the economy and to maintain macroeconomic identity. This scheme allows us to obtain a more detailed expression of the goods and services account, which can be expressed in the supply and use table, where in the supply side, we'll have the production matrix plus the import vector. And in the demand side, we will have the intermediate consumption matrix and the vector of household consumption, government, gross capital formation, and net export. With this structure, we can calculate the value added and an additional line within the same supply and use table, applying a difference between production and intermediate consumption. Now, in relation to how to value the goods and services that we record in each of our tables, the SUTs are calculated in values. Therefore, it is essential to correctly consider the evaluation. The use is valued at purchase prices, at the output at basic prices. However, to ensure a balance, it's important to add the trade margin, transfer margin, and taxes on the product and subtract the subsidies of the products on the supply side, so that both sides will be expressed at purchase prices that they are comparable. However, we must consider that export and export require a special treatment. Sorry. Recall that imports are valued at 6 prices and export at 4 prices. This is the supply and use table seen at purchase prices, where our production matrix is at basic prices. But we add an adjustment vector of trade margins, transfer margins, tax on products, subsidized, and adjustment vector of C4 added to the vector of import. From the demand side, we don't change anything since everything is valued at purchase prices. Thus, we have an equilibrium synthesized in what we know as supply and utilization and use tables. This is an example scheme where we have the detailed matrix at purchase prices, considering the quadrant described above, and considering the adjustment for a comparable measurement between supply and use. This is a summary of the useful of the supply and use table. Now, the SUT are one of the most important tools of the system of national accounts. They deliver a network with analytical and immense richness. They guarantee consistency between various aggregates of the total national accounts. If we measure by each of the 3 ways, we can have the consistency and look at what is happening with each of the transaction and the variables that are intervening. They are a compilation tool, including the satellite account, which allow us to make many analyses even outside the system, and facilitate or allow the implementation of some of the recommendations included in the manual. Some of the weakness is that in order to be able to elaborate those, that we require detailed information and information from many sources. With that, we are also synthesizing the quality of the different sources that are used for the compilation process of the account, and some way reflect the different alternative sources of information that we have. We have multiple classification. We are making a combination of different types of classification, consolidating, which is not easy for harmonization, and the process of achieving the balance at the detail level of each one of the products so that the result of the SUT is consistent is quite a laborious process. So the tool that we would like to share with you today is to support this process, to make it more efficient and faster, to have a compilation tool, an analytical tool, and have sources for other statistics also. The tool allows exploring all sources of information available in the economy. It is an integrated framework to perform a consistency analysis where several survives and administrative records are considered, allowing an efficient analysis and comparison of primary sources to achieve the consistency. Residual inconsistencies are evaluated at the level of detail and arbitrate according to the reliability levels of the estimates. So basically, here is that the arbitration process in the reconciliation process between supply and demand are made at the detail level. Now the exhaustiveness of national accounts, and when we talk about exhaustiveness of national accounts, let us remember that what we are saying here is that nothing is left out in the measurement. So it is it is an appropriate framework for the estimation of relief variables for which there are not reliable sources of information. In that sense, it is what refers to exhaustiveness issues, and these compilation tools allow us to have this variable present and also allows a detailed and consistent inflation process. Deflation process, sorry. In general terms, then we can simplify the process of compiling the SUT in 3 stages. One is the collection of the base information. Another is associated with the manipulation of the information, and the last one is the one we achieve balance between supply and demand in order to reach the consistency required for each of the products at a detail level and the macroeconomic identity level. This process can be done at current prices or at constant prices, simultaneous or consecutively. For this portion, focus on this first stage, the process of balancing supply and demand. Once the first 2 stages have been constructed, this tool facilitates the balancing process to be done in a more expeditious way. Some examples of analytical tools are that we can see the detail of the production function, the contribution of international trade to the economy, to the domestic economy, the detail of consumption, the evolution of industry structure, the detail of investment components, the importance of taxes, and the detailed structures, composition, and contribution of the factors. As for the sources of other statistics, the SUT are the starting point for the input-output matrix and the content of value added in foreign trade, extension of the employment matrix or social accounting, among others. So the potential benefit of the tool are that it's free, practical, and also flexible. Allow the reduction of the time spent in the final reconciliation stage, allow consistent procedures over time, filling data gaps also, detect major discrepancies, and objective certain process that are subjective in nature, also allow for a transparent process and facilitate the management of SUTs. And finally, I want to share with you this extract from Richard Stone, winner of Nobel Prize in 1984. In spite of the best, in spite of the best endeavors of statisticians, national accounts contain statistical discrepancy, residual errors, unidentified items, and other balancing entries, evidence of the difficulties arising from the fact that the information available is some degree incomplete, inconsistent, and unreliable. These difficulties are not peculiar to economics. They have long been recognized in the physical science, and method of combining and adjusting measurement have been devised. Thus, about 100 years ago, Merriman wrote, the absolutely true values of the observed quantities cannot in general be found, but instead must be accepted and used values derived from the combination and adjustment of the measurements, which are the most probable and hence the best. Richard Stone. Thank you, and Claudia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Janina, for your presentation and the refresh of these concepts and the advantages of these supply and use tables and the approach to this tool. So let's go to the next session that is in charge of Michael Stanger, the regional advisor of UNSD, the Statistics Division of United Nations. He's going to present indeed the tool, and if you have any questions when he's talking about this tool, please post it in the chat so we can solve or respond your question during the same presentation. Michael, please.
Thanks, thanks, Claudia. Good morning from the UN, New York. Thank you for having me here. My name is Michael Stanger. I am, as Claudia said, I'm the Interregional Advisor at the Statistics Division here at the UN. And I will be presenting the practice of this tool. But before I start, I want to thank ECLAC for this opportunity. I think it's a good idea to set up this sort of short webinars or workshops to discuss more focused issues like this one, and try to provide solutions that may help the compilation or the development of these statistics. From the introduction that you gave us, participants, I understand that some of you compile supply and use tables or have compiled supply and use tables. Some of you maybe have never been in a cycle of compiling these supply and use tables. So we wanted to give you kind of introduction, setting the basis of supply and use tables to demonstrate the tool. And the reason why we went into some graphical presentations of the supply and use table is because if you go to different manuals or descriptions, I would say, of supply and use tables, you will see that there are different settings, different formats. However, we have taken this tool and we presented all the supply and use tables as the tool works, meaning that we have the supply on the left and we have the use on the right-hand side. So the way we are going to proceed and present the tables is basically one big rectangle with both the supply and use table at the same level, but you may find the other settings where the supply is on top and the use is at the bottom, and so on. So that's one of the things, and the last one is basically you know that Richard Stone is one of the fathers of the national accounts, and more particularly relating to the supply and use tables, along with others. And the way they present the balancing, I would say, is basically saying that we deal with statistics. I mean, the last name of the national accounts is statistics. We work with national account statistics. It's not only accounting, but the input information it's basically statistical, meaning what? That there's some uncertainty. And the process of balancing the supply and use table, and not only supply and use tables. I will start with an example that is not a supply and use table, but whenever we are trying to balance or achieve the best result that we want to present to the users, will require always some sort of balancing, some sort of adjustment or an assessment of the reliability of the data we are compiling, whether it's a survey, it's a number that is coming out of a compiling process. Whenever we do deflation, whenever we try to have contrast between different sources, we are always managing that uncertainty one way or another. And one of the colleagues that introduced themselves said that this balancing process may be rather manual. And we were discussing also yesterday, there's an art behind the balancing of the supply and use table. We put together a lot of data, and then we start trying to check how we get to an equilibrium between the sides. And there will always be some manual intervention. The only thing that we are presenting here is a tool that is helping us or compilers to make decisions as objectively as possible. So we are trying to give a sort of objective set of criteria that can be put in advance. So the subjectivity in the balancing is reduced to the minimum. Why? Because then it's easier to redo the exercise. We can trace it back and so on. And two different people will come up with the same result if all the criteria is objective. However, as you may know, whenever you have some sort of equilibrium or some sort of balancing exercise, if two people try to reach the same result, it's going to be really, really hard. And if there's more people involved, then it's even harder. Anyway, so I just want to set the control expectations a little bit, because this is not going to solve all the problems, but definitely will help you to work with problems that relate to balancing. So before I go to the tool itself, I want to first describe how this formula, so to speak, work. So Claudia, can you confirm, please, that the presentation it's full screen? Good. So we, along with the invitation to this little workshop, we added some material. So the material that we send you, it's the installation process. This, in bottom line, if I have to describe this tool, so to speak, it's nothing but an Excel formula. So we are going to proceed with the balancing as in a very simple manner, and that manner is just an Excel formula. But the Excel formula is not programmed in Excel. It's an R code that will run behind Excel, and we are going to link Excel with R with an interface that is called BERT. All that explanation is basically in the documentation that we sent. So I'm going to describe now how this formula that is called SUTB works. And SUTB stands for supply and use table balancing. And it's nothing, as I say here in the next one, but an extension of an application that is well known to most of you probably, that is called the RAS. So the RAS is an application or an algorithm developed in the 60s or 70s, maybe, or maybe before that, that helped balance double entry tables. So we have a table, I'll show you later, that has two constraints, and the total by column and the total by row are known but the inner matrix is unbalanced. So the sum of the rows is not this, it doesn't equal the total that we have as the total in the rows, and the same with the columns. And that's algorithm RAS type is expanded to deal with the problematic that we find when balancing supply and use tables. And I'm being explicit with the RAS type because the RAS is an algorithm by itself, and it's an iterative proportional distribution. So it distributes the discrepancies by row, and then by column, then by row, then by column, until the discrepancy is very, very small. So the problematic is a double entry table with marginal totals that are fixed. The only difference with the SUTB is that it's a one-shot result compiled using a different procedure. It's not iterative. It's least square kind of optimization process. So the formula, again, SUTB, requires 5 inputs. And this is key because the inputs are going to basically determine how the algorithm is going to work. And the result of this formula should be a balanced table, naturally. So it will give you the result almost instantaneously. You will see when we see the exercise. So what are the 5 variables that can be 4 in the end, but I'll tell you when and how. So the first variable of the formula is the unbalanced table. Okay, so if you have a supply and use table that it's unbalanced, well, if it's balanced, you don't need to run it, but you could run it over a balanced one. But if you have an unbalanced supply and use table, that's the first variable that you will input in this formula. The second is the basic horizontal restrictions, so to speak. So when we have the supply and use table, if you remember, you have the supply on the left and the use on the right, sorry, by product. So when we want to balance any product, corn, sugar, electricity, calculators, I don't know, whatever you produce on the left side needs to be balanced to the right side. So it's consumed as intermediate input, as final consumption, is exported, it's accumulated as inventory, and so on. That's a basic one. That's the most basic constraint that we find in the national accounts. The second one, that's the second variable. The third variable that we need to input is the vertical restrictions. So we may include some restrictions that are not product related, but will be activity related or expenditure, other components related, right? So if you remember, for example, we have the columns that will be exports or imports by product. That can be services and goods. It can be one vector, it can be a matrix. You will see that you can set the table the way you want. But let's say we have the imports, and we may get the imports, for example, and this is a practical example, we may get the imports, the total imports from the balance of payments that may not be in the same team or in the same office of the national account. So we get the total and it's 1,000. But since we are compiling the supply and use table, we need the imports by product, and we will get the imports from customs, let's say. And the imports from customs may have some differences. You know that, right? From the numbers that are coming from the balance of payments and directly from customs can be different. So maybe customs is giving you a set of products that you need to add to the services that are coming from the balance of payments, and the total that you get is 950, while the balance of payments is giving you 1,000. So then you have a restriction that is vertical, meaning that you have to match 1,000 that you are given by the balance of payments, and that's the statistics that you are going to respect, but you have some sort of number that is not balanced from customs in the detail that you need. So that's a vertical restriction. There are other vertical restrictions when you compile supply and use tables that relate to the offsetting of certain numbers. For example, for those that have compiled supply and use table, this is natural. For those that haven't for a while, may need to remember, but for those that don't know, there are certain valuations in the supply and use table that are basically instrumental measurements. And I'm talking about the margins, transport margins and trade margins. You know that the valuation, Janina was talking about the valuation layers. We need to play around with those valuations in order to remove them from somewhere and put them again somewhere else. And we do that also with the inputs when we need to readjust the CIF and FOB, right? The input should be valued at FOB, but some of them are CIF, so we need to remove and then replace those values somewhere else. So those setting off numbers will require a vertical restriction. And the vertical restriction is that the margins, total margins, need to be 0. But if you're estimating the margins from the trade industry, and then you have to remove it from some of the other products that may give you a different value, okay? So the sum of margins is 100 from the products, and it's minus 120 from the trade industry. Those need to sum up to 0. And the Excel example I will show you. But bottom line is another vertical restriction, and that's the third variable that we need to include in this formula. So again, we have the imbalance, we have the horizontal restrictions, we have the vertical restrictions, and now one feature of this tool is that the fourth variable that we are including here is what we call the reliability coefficient, which is a big plus, because when we are balancing a table, as I told you, we know that there are certain cells or even full vectors or even SUT matrices inside the table that are stronger than others. So when we talk about reliability of the input data, it's not whether they are reliable or non-reliable. There's a spectrum there. So there are variables. For example, some government information that we are collecting in the national accounts is fixed. It's something that we cannot touch. If they're giving us 2,000, that's the number that we keep in the national accounts. However, when we receive other information like the changes in inventories for certain crop, we know that maybe that's not so strong. Maybe it's a weaker piece of information. It's estimated with so many assumptions that we know that if we need to balance, we are going to touch that variable more than others. So the variable that I'm talking about here, the fourth variable in the formula, is allowing us to give each of the cells in the table its reliability. So if we know that the imports, again, if the imports come from a very strong source, we are going to give it a high reliability coefficient. If we know that some intermediate consumption components, maybe one product is strong, but the other components are weak. So the strong one, we will give a high reliability coefficient, and the other ones, we are going to give a low reliability coefficient. And these coefficients should come from expert knowledge, either from the surveys that we're collecting, from an experienced compiler, assessing the sources that we're using, and so on. So this, in general, is the most subjective part of the process. But it's subjective whether you do it manually or you do it automatically. But at least we are trying to input some objectivity to the process, so you know what cells are stronger and what cells are weaker. And in the extreme, we will have cells that are untouchable. So when you run the process, you want to keep the value of certain cells, and those will have a reliability coefficient of 100. And again, I will show you in the example. And there's the last one, the fifth variable that we have in the formula is what we call the additional restrictions. I'll show you that the horizontal and vertical restriction are clustered. So we put them all together in one matrix. But the additional restrictions will need to be individual. So each additional restriction that you want to impose to the system will need to be individual. And not only individual, but we will have to give the software or the formula, if you want, an additional value, which is the constraint to the restriction. So we want two variables to sum up to a certain number. We want them to be 0. We want them to be whatever we want it to be. So, and this is just a theory. I'll show you an example, and I hope that will make things clearer. But I wanted to be sure that the formula will require 5 input variables, but the 5th one is optional. So you can omit the additional restriction. This is something extra that you can add if needed. So let me go to the example, more visual example. I see there are some comments in the chat. I'm in presentation mode, so I cannot see the chat. So Claudia, if there's questions or suggestions that I go slower or faster, please let me know, because I can't see the chat from where I'm standing now.
There are no questions so far. Okay.
Good. All right. So again, I put the formula here as you're going to write in Excel. Again, you don't need to write it. You don't need to use it in Excel, but I find it easier when you are experimenting and trying to understand how this works to use it in Excel. You can then move to R or something else if you want to, but the benefit of using it in Excel is that you can immediately work and get results instantaneously. So we have what I call, sorry, I didn't translate this. There are some other Spanish versions in the other presentation. We're going to correct this. So this is SUT-D, or it should be U, SUT-U. So it's basically this matrix is a 3x4 matrix, represents an unbalanced table. For our purposes, it should be an unbalanced supply and use table. And I have put some Greek letters there representing the original estimates. Before everything else, I want to tell you that all the inputs in the formula should have the same format. So if we have a supply and use table that is 3x4, 3 rows and 4 columns, the horizontal restrictions should be a 3x4 matrix. The vertical restriction should be the same size, 3x4. The adjustability coefficients, again, should be 3x4. The only one that is different is going to be the additional restrictions. And the additional restrictions, as I said before, will be composed of one matrix that is the same size of the supply and use table, or the table that you are working with, plus an extra cell on top. Okay? So it's going to be a matrix of 3x5 for each of the additional restrictions that you need. So if you need 2, like in this case, it's going to be a 6x5, not a 3x5. The first one is 3x5, the second is 3x5, the 2 together is going to be 6x5. So let me explain how this works. So horizontal restrictions, how do we input these restrictions? So basically, we have a table that is not balanced, and we want to force the results to balance, meaning that alpha plus beta must equal gamma plus delta. All right, so the left-hand side of the table at the level of this row, or this product, if you want, needs to be the same as the one you have on the right-hand side. And this is supply and use, the example of a supply and use balancing. The supply and use table is going to be much larger than this, but this is just an example. So if we want to force alpha plus beta equals gamma plus delta, what we do is we impose a vector. This is a, I would say, a weighted sum of this row. So how do we weight this, or how we create a weighted sum of this row? We basically impose a vector that will be 1, 1, minus 1, minus 1. Why? Because if we overimpose this vector over this row, we will have alpha plus beta minus gamma minus delta. So the sum of this minus the sum of this equals 0. So the horizontal and vertical restrictions are constrained to 0. So if I impose this constraint, I ensure that this side equals this side, because the sum of these two minus the sum of these two equals 0. And that's the way we impose these restrictions. It may look a little strange at first, but when you start using it, you will get comfortable with this. And I'll show you again with the example later, some examples later. How do we do with the vertical ones? Exactly the same way. So we may say that the alpha plus epsilon equals iota, right? So we have the vertical cancellation, or said, if I say it the other way, we want the sum of these two equal the total that we have here, if there's a total there. Then we overimpose again a vertical vector that is 1, 1, and minus 1. So alpha plus epsilon minus this iota equals 0. So it's balanced again, meaning that the result that you will get is that the sum of these two equals this one. And remember, this formula is working with all the constraints at the same time. So it's not simply using prorata to adjust these two to match this one, because you have another one horizontal that is ensuring that the sum of these two equals the sum of these two. And we will have restrictions for all the rows, and eventually we may have restrictions for all the columns, and they have to work at the same time. Let me go to the reliability coefficients. Okay, I told you it's between 0 and 100, or between 0 and 1. You can use either one, whatever is easier for you. And it's a range, so you can put whatever number you want between 0 and 100, but meaning always that 100 is going to be the most reliable number. When we talk about the most reliable possible number, means that when we are balancing horizontally and vertically, this number is not going to be touched. So this, I don't know the name. To me, that would be a gamma, but I already use gamma. Let's say that this is gamma. Gamma has 100 here. So whenever I run this formula, this number is going to remain untouched. So the estimated of gamma is going to be gamma. On the other hand, if we have eta here that has a 0, we are saying that the original estimate of eta is really weak. So when we are adjusting this row, the second row, and the fourth column, according to any restrictions that we have, this variable is going to be proportionally modified, adjusted higher. So the adjustment to that variable is going to be proportionally higher to the rest. And remember, I'm not sure I said this, but all this work is proportional to the original estimate. So if the original estimate is small, the adjustment in absolute terms is going to be small. But if we have a 0, proportionally to the other ones, it's going to be higher. Okay, so if you have an original estimate of 0.2, do not expect an adjustment of 100. It's going to be small because it's proportional to the original observation, but in proportional terms, it's going to be higher. Okay, so these are the basic ones. We need to input these 4 variables for it to run. But as I said before, there's a very useful additional input that can be really helpful for certain additional piece of information, or even reliability factors that you may have. And these are called the additional constraints. And as I said, in this case, I have 2. Those that are highlighted, or not highlighted, are how do you say, shaded in gray and in some kind of orange. So we have 2. How do we read this? So again, remember that we are working with matrices and vectors. So we overimpose what we want on our original table, right? And then we make an explicit constraint at the end, or an explicit value that we want it to match. So let me ask you, and respond without the mic on. So we don't have 30 answers. But I guess, and I hope that you can get what this gray one means. So we have one here, one here, one here. The rest are 0, and we have the X there. What does it mean? It means that the alpha plus phi plus kappa in the original, so we have the estimates of alpha, phi, and kappa, needs to match this value, which is X, capital X. Why? Because we know, I don't know how, but this is as an example, we know that the sum of these three, because of a different source, we know that has to be X. And on the other hand, we know that this phi, gamma, and delta, this diagonal here within this table, again, I don't know why and how, that depends on what you have in your own exercise. The sum should equal this Y, capital Y. Okay, so I have it here. So alpha, this one, this corner, plus phi plus kappa equals this one. And the second constraint, additional, is that this pi or phi, I don't know anymore, gamma and delta equals this capital Y. Okay, so, and these are examples. It means that wherever you put a 1, so to speak, or a -1, it can be anything. This is a weighted sum. So in this case, I'm saying 1 times alpha plus 1 times phi plus 1 times kappa equals this X. You can put a different number, 0.8, or whatever piece of information you have. Or it can be the difference between two variables. There was a question, and I'm going to show you how that works in a second. Okay, so these are the basics. So these are the 5 variables that we need to put in. Now I want to take you to the real thing. How do we work with the formula? I'll show you. We need 5 variables going in, 4 or 5, sorry, and just it will work like any Excel file. You have the data, the required inputs to install this into your computer. So some constraints is that Excel should be at least from 2003. So if you have something older than 2003, maybe the interface is not going to work. I'm expecting that we all have a newer Excel. And if you face any problem, please get in touch with us. But it's relatively straightforward to have this installed in on your computer. So let me change the screen that I'm sharing. Claudia, can you confirm that you have the Excel with the RAS?
Yes, we have your Excel in the screen.
Thank you. All right. So I know that we call this SUT okay. You lost it? Okay. I assume that we have the Excel still over there.
We have it.
Okay. So I know that we call this workshop supply and use table balancing tool, and that's how it was developed, and that's how we are going to use it. But it has many other uses. Okay. So in order to explain it better, and it will help you understand better because we can see what we're doing. I'll start with a RAS type problem. So we know what we are inputting here, and then I will show you how it works for the supply and use table once we understand how this works in a smaller scale exercise. Well, the RAS type exercise can be huge, but I have this that it's kind of smallish, so we can see what we're doing. So what do we have from the RAS? Do we have this graded area here at the bottom and to the right, and these are the totals. The totals of what's inside this table, which is orange. I should change the color because I never know what color this is. But let's forgive me, I'm calling this orange. And I know that some people will slap my hands if I say orange. But anyway, bear with me with the colors. So we have the cell inside, and we have the totals at the bottom, at the bottom and to the far right. What's the problem with this these double entry tables is that we know in this case that the total here by activity is given, and it's a hard number. It has a reliability that is high, and we have the total, let's say by product here, that it's again reliable. So we have the totals from surveys or wherever we have it, but we know that all what we have inside these structures, if you want, or even sample surveys, or even administrative source, that it's partial, or we are missing some information, or we're overestimating other information, we put it here, and we know that these numbers are weaker, but are giving us a very good shape of how the output of this table should look like once we have these two totals here. Okay, so if I put here the sum of this row, product 1, if I see it on my Excel, it says 155. So 48 plus 106 is 155, but the total that we're imposing here is 113. Okay, so we need to reduce these numbers to match 113. The second one sum up to 141, and we have 127. And you get the point. All the rows are not balanced. What happens if we look at the columns? This column 1 for activity 1, let's say, sum up to 518, but we have a total of 457. It happens the same here, and so on. So we have a problem here that requires double entry balancing, RAS type. So now let me go first to the constraints, because we know that we have a problem that is not balanced. That's the first variable that we need to input here. How do we set the horizontal restrictions, and how do we set the vertical restrictions? As I told you, and let me go to the basic horizontal restrictions. So forget about what you have on the right, this yellow thing. Let's focus on this one, horizontal restrictions. If you remember, we have to impose the restrictions as a weighted sum, right? So what we are saying is that the sum of this side, or the sum of components, minus the total equals 0. Remember that the 0 is implicit in the basic constraints. Second product, we have that the sum of all these components must match the total that we have here. Okay, that's the restriction. It's a floating, so to speak, restriction. The only thing that we're saying is that the sum of components needs to equal what we have on the far right constraint. Let's go to the next one. It's the vertical restrictions. So what did we say for the vertical restrictions? We are saying that the sum of the components of the column minus the total needs to be 0. Again, remember, the balancing constraint here is that 0. So the sum of components equals the bottom. Yes? Now, we can balance this and balance this one, but how do we ensure that the 113, and in this case 157, let's say the first column, the first row and the first column, how do we ensure that when we balance the whole thing, we are not getting a 430 here? Because we can basically arrive to a number that will break that total, right? So the way we do it is going to the reliability coefficients. Remember, we have a matrix where we say we need reliability coefficients. The higher the number, the more reliable the original estimate is. And the lower is the most that we're going to adjust. So the way we ensure that these totals are respected and not touched is by adding 100. And let me put ones to everything here because we were playing with these numbers. So everything is 1 now, meaning that whatever we have inside is unreliable, equally unreliable, but the totals are the ones that I want to respect. So that's the fourth input. Okay, so let's see how it works. And basically I have the formula here. Probably you can, let me show it here. And it has four inputs, right? Before to age 16, that basically, believe me now, you have this Excel file. Believe me now that the before age 16 is the unbalanced table that I showed you at the beginning. B21 age 33 is the horizontal constraints. B38 age 50 is the vertical ones, and K21 Q33 is the reliability coefficients. So let me run this. This is the output. Okay, so I run this thing, and this is the formula that you will have installed. I have a kind of comma, or I don't know how called that thing is called, but it's basically to show you the formula. I remove it and I write the formula. You can write it using the formula in Excel. That it will show you the inputs that you need to put. Is as if you were working with an ordinary formula in Excel. Okay, let me go back to the estimate. So you saw it run. I'll show you why I have that up there. I'm going to reduce the size so you can see what is the formula taking. You see, I don't know if you can see, it's highlighted the unbalanced table, vertical, horizontal constraints, and reliability coefficients. Let me go back to the estimates. And I'll show you, if you have a calculator, you will see that 38 plus 75 equals 113.6. I have the difference here. So just to corroborate that the thing is doing what it's supposed to do. And if I have the vertical one, I will have 457.9. Again, I have the difference here to show you that it's a zero. I don't know if you can see it. It's a line showing that it's zero. So it's balancing the two sides as one. And it's respecting this number here is the difference, but I have over here the difference between the original number that was imposed as a total and the sum of the components that it's also the same number. I'm just showing that when I put 100, it respects that. And when I put the formula, it will respect the constraints. Okay, so we have this purple, let me call it purple, table that is completely balanced horizontally and vertically, and the totals are respected. So this is the basic approach to dealing with this sort of problematics. Okay, no questions?
There are no questions.
Very good.
On the chat.
Okay, so I told you we may need to we may need to play with some of the input data, right? I told you that it's a range of reliability here. I'm assuming that everything is bad as the others. So the original estimates that we have are weak. All of them at the same level. So I put a 1, I could put a 50, and the results are going to be the same because all these relationships are relative to each other. But let's say we have a number that's 120, product 4, activity 2, let's say is part of the diagonal of the output matrix, let's say, and we know that 120 is really hard. It's a hard number, but since we are assessing it with a 1, like everybody else, it's giving us a new number that is 108. However, we go to the, let's say, to the person compiling these numbers, and they say, no, the 120.6 is a really good number. You can change it to 108. You can change the other ones, but not that one. So what we do is we go to product 4. Remember, this is product 4, activity 2, 120. It's giving us 108.7. We need that number to be as close as possible or closer to 120. So instead of being a reliability 1, let's say it's a reliability 75. Okay, the only thing I did was to change the reliability of that observation to a much higher number. So it's 3/4 of us more reliable than the other ones. So it's almost 100% reliable, 3/4 of reliability. And you see it's 120 and it changed only to 119.3. But what's the beauty of this? it didn't change the balance of the other things. It touched the other variables in the column and the row more than it did to this one in proportional terms. Sorry, Claudia.
Yes, we have some questions on the chat from Tira Newborn. The volume has gone, she asked it.
Well, I think the volume, my volume?
The volume, I'm sorry, I was thinking on the volume of the figures in volume, but no, the volume of
It's the mic. No.
Yes.
Yeah, you can hear me. So no, it's
Yes,
not. It's okay. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
No more questions. So can you check with that person if she or he have access to the mic or to the sound?
Yes, she's okay now.
Okay, good. All right, so if you're following, I said this 120 is really reliable, so I changed this. I can put a 50, I can put a 51. You can put whatever thing between, sorry, I put the 51 to the next one, but anyway, this is a 0, so it won't change. Zeros won't change. That's another feature of this. If you have a 0, it won't change it to 1. Whatever starts with 0 finishes with 0. In general, we are not expecting changes in sign, but it may occur because if you force a number, if you force 100 to behave like a -80, there's no way this 100 is going to become a -80 if it doesn't change the sign. What I'm trying to say is that here we are constraining things. We are forcing one thing to look like the other one. And if there's a extreme where you are forcing a number to become negative, the number will become negative. If you want to avoid that, we can actually work with the reliability coefficients. So if a number is a very small number, 0.2, but the adjustment is minus 0.3, that 0.2 may become minus 0.1. But if you don't want that to happen, give a higher reliability to a 0.2. We were discussing this yesterday, we could actually constrain the exercise to avoid those changes of sign. However, since we are focusing on supply and use tables, we wanted to allow the software to change positive to negatives, especially when we are working with changes in inventories that can be very weak, and it's going to be the most adjustable figure in many cases, and that can take changes of sign. So we can move from -30 to +50. I mean, so that's why we are not forcing this. So if you don't want to change the sign, increase the reliability of the observation. Talk to the owner of the data source and see if you can manage those coefficients. Okay.
Sorry, I have a question. I put it in chat, but I don't think, sorry.
Yes, please.
When you change for the 120.6 and you change that to the reliability to 75, the numbers in the row with it in the gray box up there, right, that reduced to 119. But the 37 increased to 39 and the 93 reduced though to 80. Like, why did it decide to give increase to one and a reduction to the other?
Okay.
The other two variables.
So you're saying we have 108 there. You're talking about these ones that are here, right? 43
Yes.
and 87.
Yes.
So I move this one to, let's say again, 75.
Yes.
Okay, so let me copy this as value here, just to be sure, because both of them are going down, right?
Yes.
And the reason is that these three, we know from the beginning that these three need to match this 239. So this 239 is our golden number. It's set on stone. So this 39 needs to be respected. So what we are saying here, this 120, it's stronger than this 37 and this 93, right? That's why we're saying let's move not that far from 120, or even if I put 100, it will be the same number. But let me play a little bit. So let me put 75. So the only way we can keep this 239, that it's our number, our anchor number, and increasing this, what do we have to do? We need to decrease this 2. So it moves according to the whole setting. It will reduce 43 in 4 points, let's say 4 digits, 4 units, and this 87 will reduce in 7 units. And again, as I told you, it's relatively proportional. So if we try to think an explanation, it's not going to be directly proportional because it's a double entry thing. So remember that we need to play this with this number. This 39 is not affecting this row only, it's affecting this column as well. And this 80 is also affecting this column. So it's an integrated biproportional distribution. But you see that the adjustment to this 87 is more or less twice as big as this one. Why? Because the original estimates are twice as big.
Okay.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. And you will see that these numbers, if I modify this one, as you say, and your question is really good, because if I modify the reliability of this one, it will change this one too. Once I change this whole column needs to change, right? So let me put a 1 just to show you. This is 29 and 81.4. Okay, but I'm touching this row. I'm touching this row. But since I'm touching this number, the whole column is going to change. And I put 75, and it goes 29.3 and 81. I don't know if you saw how that changed.
Yes, I saw.
Okay, so that's the way it's going to work, you see, but it's keeping the whole system really, really balanced according to the information that we have. Okay, let me move now to the additional constraints. Let me put it back so we see what's the formula is taking. It doesn't matter if you don't see the numbers. The only thing I'm showing you that the formula is taking the unbalanced, horizontal, vertical reliability coefficients. And only 4. Let me add now the additional constraints. And regarding the additional constraints, let me reiterate this. I'm sorry, I need to make this clear. The size of the original table and balance table is that one that I had shaded. But the additional constraints will require an additional row. Basically, it requires an additional cell, but we are going to include the whole row. So, sorry, the whole column. So the size of the additional constraints, again, for each of the constraints that you have, is going to be as big as the original exercise plus 1 column. And you're going to put the constraint at the upper right corner of that. And if I have more than one, we stack them up, one on top of the other. Okay, that's the way it works. Otherwise, we will have to include so many variables going to the right in the formula that it makes it unmanageable. If I have 5 of these, I don't want to have a formula with 9 inputs. So basically, we decided to keep the additional constraints as one big matrix. As long as it respects the size, it's going to work perfectly. And if you thought that I had a mistake here, it's not. I just removed the additional constraints to make it easier for me to work them out directly in the formula. So the only thing I did, and let me go back again with the Excel. The only thing I did to the formula was to add the 3 first additional constraints. Okay, so I had the same unbalanced, horizontal, vertical reliability coefficients, but I added 3 new constraints. Okay, what are these new additional constraints telling me? Let's go with the first one. Can you read that? I hope you can see that, and you are becoming natural now to read these constraints, the way the formula will work. So what this constraint is saying is that activity 3, activity 4, activity 5 for product 4, 5, 6, and 7 So the sum of these components needs to add up to 190. So what example comes to my mind for this sort of constraints? It may be the case that the original supply and use table that you had was based on a structural detailed survey that had three different activities putting together or responding to 4 different products. What if the follow-up surveys are smaller in size and coverage, and it's a sample survey, is collecting these 3 activities as one activity, the main activity, agriculture. Instead of having rice, corn, and sugarcane, I'm not able to ask the question individually. I'm asking the agriculture, the whole agriculture for the follow-up survey. And I don't have rice, corn, and sugar and rum as a product, but I have agricultural products. That means that the additional survey that I have as a follow-up is giving me this number, 190, right? So I need to constrain the sum of these activities for this product to a number that I know. So this, and I'm highlighting those activities and products, so to speak, that I have constrained. And the number that I'm getting, and it's obvious that I'm going to get that because I'm constraining this, is 190. So this 190 that I have at the bottom is the sum of these activities. Let me just copy this. I'll copy the headings so we know what you can believe me that I'm telling the truth, not manipulating the information. So activity 3, remember, to activity 5 and product 4 to product 7 is giving me 190. Yes, why? Because I know that it's the sum of these, all of these, even if there's a 0. I don't need to have one where there's a 0. I don't need a 1 there. I can have a 0 there. It's going to work as well because it's a weighted sum. So 1 times 0 is going to give me 0 anyway. So I'm summing all this to give me 190. Let me remove this just for a second. Now that you know, if I remove that, what I did was to remove the additional constraints from the exercise to show you that the sum of this square, if I don't constrain that 190, is giving me 220. It's overestimating, right? But I know, again, from another survey, that the total here should be 190. And this is going to be very useful for the supply and use table. When you have certain totals that you want to respect, when we are working with the digital supply and use table, that's one of the topics of the update of the SNA, we may have the total of certain activities and we want to break it down by additional products or additional activities, but we know the total. The same happens with the informal economy. Sometimes we have the estimate for the total and we want to break it down into formal and informal. As long as we have the total, we can introduce estimates inside the table and then rebalance those individual components to be sure that we are arriving at the numbers that we trust most. Okay, so I have this 190 and I decided that these other components, again, I'm playing with the numbers. So the second constraint that I have, and this is the third, the second constraint that I have additional is that the sum of products 9 to 11 for activities 4 and 5, this square here needs to sum up to 400 because I know that, simply because I know that from a different source. So even though the estimates inside of this purple will respond to the adjustability coefficients, and these numbers, adjustability coefficients, are also in play when I'm over imposing these new constraints. And if you see this small table here sum up to 400 because I forced that. The same if I force this 2 that I said is 260. The sum of these two components, including the total, is 260. So I'm going to touch only this one because I know that this 191 is strong. It's not going to change, but at least this one is going to change in order to match the 260 that I have. Okay, I'm going faster now because it's more of the same. There was a question yesterday. What if it's only once that I can put here in the additional constraints? I told you no. This is a weighted sum. I put once because I want the sum of each of the components in the full size. Sum up to that. You can put 0.5. I don't know if that makes sense or not. Unless you have certain coverage that you know is covering only 0.5 or 0.75, you could play with that. But it might be the case that some constraints need to be negative. So what I'm saying here is that I want this to give me the results, vertical or horizontal, but what I do know is that the distance between these two estimates needs to be 40. And in this case, it's almost 50 something, 54, right? But I know that for whatever reason, I know that the distance or the difference between these two needs to be 40 or 50. Let me put 50. I don't want to constrain this too much. Instead of being 54, it's going to be 50. Okay. What do? I add a new constraint, which is here, and I add it to the formula. Okay. And the new estimate is giving me 50.1, 100.1, and the difference that is here is a 50. It's a constraint that I put. So still respecting this one, still respecting this one, this additional one, and so on. So basically, we are adjusting the inside table with all the information that we have that is not matching necessarily the size of the table or the information that, or the way we are formatting this this table. I hope it's clear, so we understand all the inputs that we need to solve this sort of problems, that it's somehow simpler than a supply and use table. But if you have this clear in your mind, why do we have the horizontal restriction, the vertical restrictions, and the reliability coefficients? We can move on, and I'll show you how this works for the supply and use table. Again, the formula can be used for any type of problem that you need to solve that is like this. So if you have an employment estimate where you're breaking down employment by activity and you have certain totals, but you have the totals by type of employment. If you want to break it down by sectoral accounts, and you have the total for all the industries, and you have to have this cross relationship between industries and institutional sectors. What else? You can break down the income approach. So if you want to break it down, the value added that we mentioned at the beginning, and you want to have the components of value added, you can do that also, etc. Whatever problem that you may face that need this sort of solution, it will help you relatively fast. Okay, so I have like 10 more minutes. So let me go to what we came to, right? I haven't spoken about the tool for the supply and use table, but it's nothing but the application of what you saw to the supply and use table. So whenever we have any table, we know the size. The only thing that we need to play with, so to speak, or we have the flexibility to change are the vertical restrictions, horizontal restrictions, and the adjustability coefficients. What is this? This is a table, the same. I'm going to put it far back. It doesn't matter if you don't see the numbers. The only thing that I want to emphasize again is that we have the supply on the left side, and we have the use on the right side. So this is the shape that it needs to have in order for this to work. What is this? This is the supply and use table that you find in the 2008 SNA, chapter 14, or I don't remember the exact number, but if you go to the supply and use table chapter, you will see that there's an example supply and use table. This is it. I remove some totals. We don't need the totals. We need the cells that are part of the exercise only. And I put the table, and then I put some shocks into a table. Why some shocks? Because the example table is balanced, and I need to be unbalanced. So I put shocks to all the cells, and I move to the right. To the right of this exercise, you should have this Excel file just in case. I'm computing here in column AW and AX total supply for agricultural products and total use for agricultural products. And you see it's 130. I hope you can see 130 and 127. So I take the difference, and it's obviously non-zero. The same for ores, the same for manufacturing products, the same for construction, and so on. So after I apply the shocks to all the cells, I have my first input to the formula, that is an unbalanced supply and use table. And this is what you are going to have, an unbalanced supply and use table. What do I need next? Horizontal restrictions, vertical restrictions, and adjustability coefficients. And that is in the second tab. And this is how it looks like. So I keep the headings. I kept the headings, so you know that the size are the same. I kept the product headings to the left as well. So what do I have as a horizontal restriction? Again, once on the supply side and -1 on the use side. Remember what did this mean? A weighted sum. So all the sum on the right hand side minus the sum, all the sum on the left hand side minus the sum on the right hand side needs to equal. So this is balancing the product at the level of products. Okay. What do I have as a vertical restriction? I have vertical restriction. Let me freeze this so we know where we are. What columns are we freezing? Are we basically playing with or restricting somehow? The vertical restrictions, I have only 2. This is all ones, and I have it again, the same one over here. And if you see the heading is CIF and FOB and margins, trade and transport margins. Let me go back to the supply and use table. The fact that it's 1 is that the exercise that I'm running, it doesn't include the totals. So what I'm saying is that the sum of this column needs to be 0. And this is the write-off that I told you about, the canceling out of the variables. So what I'm saying is that the sum of these 3 needs to equal, or the sum of these 3 plus this negative needs to be 0. But if I show you the total, it's -1.5, so it's not balanced. The same happens with the CIF-FOB. CIF-FOB, we need to subtract and then add, and it has to be the same number. And in this case, it's giving us 0.4. We could, again, add any constraint that we want that needs to sum 0 in the basic constraints. Okay, so that's what I'm showing you here. This one is vertical and the other one is vertical, so it needs to add up to 0 without the totals. And the reliability constraints. Again, this is an exercise, so the numbers that I'm putting here are random. 90 to the output matrix, I'm putting 75 to the intermediate consumption matrix, for example, that is kind of weaker. I'm putting 100 for government consumption collective. That number comes from the government accounts and I don't want to touch any of the cells. Changes in inventories, I'm putting 5, so I'm saying this is really weak. Compared to the other ones, acquisitions, less disposal of variables or whatever you may have that is weak compared to the other ones is weaker. I'm putting, for example, exports 90, it's relatively reliable. In the case of imports of goods, I have 95, 98, services at the level of products is 95 and so on. So this is the inputs that I need. So what do? Again, I go back to the supply and use table. In this case, it's empty. I write the formula again, and I run it. And it's giving me some different numbers, obviously. So we started with 2.0, 73 here. I have 2.1, 2.3, 69.9, and 74. Now let's check. So it run really fast. It's a small size, so it will run fast. If you have a big matrix, it may take a few seconds. I have computed again supply and use, and you see that it's balanced. I have all the exercises are rounded up to 8 digits. You may end up with some decimals in the 11th or 10th position. I want to avoid that. It's easier to show that it's balanced. And I hope you don't mind having decimals in the 12th position, because it's going to R and coming back and so on. So there might be some rounding precision problems, so to speak. So again, supply use completely balanced. You have a balanced supply use table. Perfect. What else we wanted this to do? We wanted to cancel out the trade margins, right? So this is the formula. The sum of this column is giving us 0. The same should happen with this SIF and FOB, which is giving us 0 again. And as you know, when we balance the supply use table, the original one that we have was giving us, we all know this, I'm going to repeat this, from the supply use table, we derive GDP production and GDP expenditure directly. So the unbalanced supply use table was giving us production that is 1920 and expenditure 1832, which is different because it's not balanced. But once we balance the supply use table, we end up with one single GDP. Again, this is an exercise. Why it went to 1882? Because of the reliability coefficients that we imposed. What else can I say? So the formula will work with whatever size, shape of table you have. The bigger it is, the more time it will take to solve the issue, to solve the problem. Obviously, there is a limitation. So if you have a matrix that is 700 products and 500 activities, it won't run. I haven't tried it with such a big matrix, but if you have a matrix with 100 products, 60 activities, it should run really, really fast. A couple of things that I want to mention, this is basically what I wanted to show, but in 2 minutes, I want to show you the additional constraints that I forced this exercise to fulfill. And these are the ones. Oops. So supply and use, we saw that the difference is 0, so it's balanced. The trade margins and the SIF-FOB should sum up to 0, so you saw that. The other piece of information that I got, for example, is that the input-output ratio for manufacturing is 61%. I may get that, right? On the aggregate terms, on a sample survey, I may not get the detail of outward intermediate consumption, but at least I know that it's 61%. Okay, so what happens if I have that? Can I force the exercise to give me that? The answer is yes. Okay, so I calculated here the original ratio and it's giving me 58.9. But I know, as I said, from a survey that is 61%. So I force the results, in this case, I'm computing the input-output ratio from the balance table. This is the output of the balance table. You see the formula here. I sum the output, I sum the intermediate consumption, I get the ratio, and it's giving me 61%. So I can force that. While, again, respecting all the other constraints, I'm additionally constrained this exercise to give me that ratio that I know for sure that it's 61. Again, I gave you these two examples. These are the two constraints. Oops, I went up again, sorry. I'm forcing the total import to 451, and I'm forcing the total of export to 545. These are the numbers that balance of payments is giving me. So I need to be sure that when I balance the numbers, the balanced supply use table is giving me those. So let me show you the imports here. The imports are giving me 496. 496, right? The original numbers that I'm populating here from customs, 496. However, I know that the total imports need to be 451. What do? I force the imports. If you see here, that's the result of the balance table, including the, again, C4 adjustment and all the other things. I'm forcing this to be 451. I'm not gonna go through all of them. Let me go to the last one only, just to show you that the constraints work. So collective, remember that I said I trust the collective expenditure of government. In this case, it's one cell. So I need to mark that cell as 100 in the reliability. If you remember, I put 100 in the whole thing. The 0 is not going to change. So if I'm being really precise, I'd have to put 100 only here. but if I put in the whole column, doesn't really matter. So public administration collective 150.1. If I go to results, it's giving me 150.1. Obviously, I'm getting the difference of the whole column here, and it's the adjustment is 0. So I respect the numbers that I had. Okay, so those are the things that I wanted to tell you. The last, really last thing is that in your Excel, you will have, in the exercise, I have another 2 tables at the bottom. One is with adjustments, and the second one is the contributions of the adjustment to the change in GDP. And this is basically to show whoever is using the table. This is an example. You will have to redo these tables if you find them useful. It's to show that when you balance the supply and use table, you will be touching so many cells, different cells. And basically these 2 tables, the adjustments and the contributions, is showing you how much, with the setting that you have, reliability coefficients and everything else, how much each of the cells is being touched and how much of this adjustment is affecting GDP. Why? Because if you have a table that is really unbalanced, you want to focus on those that in this case is a conditional formatting, the yellow ones. The yellow ones are the ones that are affecting GDP the most. So if you have that issue, you want to see and research and investigate why these cells are being touched so much, and probably you have to go back to the survey or to other sources to help you understand whether this change is warranted or it should go somewhere else. So it gives you kind of zoom into what's happening in the table. And if your tables are really big, these yellows are going to definitely help you, believe me, if you haven't done this. Okay, I think that's all I have for now. So thank you for your attention. If you need help with the setting up of this, we are open to helping you, and I hope this is useful at some point in your work. Back to you, Claudia.
Thank you so much, Michael, for this excellent presentation and for this explanation of how these tools, how this tool works. And we will be given the Excel version of the, yes, of course. Yeah, there are many comments in the chat. If you can see, Michael, that many of the participants are saying that they are very grateful with this workshop. And we can offer from ECLAC, if you need more explanations or go in deep in this tool, we can arrange bilateral meetings with you in order to give you these explanations. If you agree, Michael.
I don't know if my mic is on. Absolutely. If you need a bilateral meeting, we can set it up and see what type of problems do you have, and we can help you set things up. And as long as you follow the instructions and you are able to install the BERT and then the formulas that we are giving you, it shouldn't be a problem for us to help you with that.
Clarice has a question. Maybe you can do it, Clarice?
Yes, I was asking about the income approach because I see you have production and expenditure. How do we integrate the income approach items into this process? And I guess it'll take a bit, maybe you could do it another time.
Should I respond, Claudia, or?
Yes, of course.
Okay, yeah. As the issue with the income approach. Sorry, let me respond directly first. The answer is yes. We could include it in the formulation. The only thing is that the income approach is not an independent estimate of GDP, right? It has components that will be residually estimated. So as I said at the beginning, we will have value added, and that we can derive that value added from the table, and it will be one line, a value added by activity. If we want to break that down to come up with the income approach, so we have the components of the income, we may do a separate table balancing exercise where we have total value added, we have the components of the value added, let's say the compensation of employees, we can have that estimated, we can have the taxes estimated, we can have a rough knowledge of the operational surplus, mixed income if we have that, and then we can elaborate, actually we can elaborate the income approach in detail if you want, using the tool. So we may have the totals of compensation of employees, we may have the total for the economy of taxes and so on, and we can use the tool to distribute this constraint to total value added by industry and the total for the whole economy. So it's a kind of RAS exercise to estimate the income approach. Now, if you have the components of the income approach and you have the mixed income estimated by activity, and you have that number really strong, and you have the operating surplus for all the activities estimated, and you want to integrate this to match value added as a difference between input and output, the answer again is yes, we can do that. We can set a bilateral meeting, or we can have another session of this sort of exercises. I would be more than happy to do it by the end of the year.
The end of the year is now. Yeah, but we are going to keep your offer. There is a raised hand. Jefte? Yes.
Yes, hello. Thank you very much, Mr. Michael, for the presentation. I just have a question, Ms. Claudia. I just have a question. I see that you mentioned earlier that we can either do this in using Excel or R. So I wanted to know if there's a package in R for this, or how would it work?
Michael?
Oh, yeah. So how this works? Basically, this is an R algorithm, right? So it's written in R, and the package or the algorithm itself is being distributed. So if you see in the chat, you will have something called SUTB.R. That's the code. So you can run that in R directly. So to make it more accessible for fast estimates and for those that are not usually working in R, and you know in R it's not so simple to start importing and exporting Excel files unless you have something developed, we decided to use BERT as an interface and basically load this algorithm that is an R code to Excel. So the only thing we are doing in Excel is running R on the back end. The package, there's no package for this. That you may find some code for probably for RAS or something else. This is an in-house, so to speak, community national accounts development that we basically, the only thing that we did was to integrate it in Excel for users. So you have short answer. The R code is in your on your desktop probably already.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Good. There is another question or comment? If no, we can say goodbye and close this meeting, this excellent workshop, and we hope that you will use this tool in your work. Michael, do you want to add something?
Well, I missed a couple of examples that I wanted to show, which is fine because it's not so relevant. But basically, if you have supply and use table and you want to expand your supply and use tables, this tool is going to be helpful as well. So happy to contribute in whatever you need. And again, thank you for your patience, and I hope it's useful one way or another for your work. Then thank you to ECLAC for this opportunity.
Thank you, Michael, for support LAC countries in this work. And if there is no more question, yeah, we have one raised hand from Wesley.
Yes, sorry to be so late with the question. I was trying to find the raise hand button, but I just had a quick question for Michael. I would have worked with the tool using the MATLAB interface, right? So I'm just kind of curious if I have the worksheet or template set up based on that interface, would it still work if I use this board version with the interface with R?
Michael?
Sorry, I'm trying to find the button. So if I understand correctly, you have the version that the IMF distributed based
yes.
on okay.
MATLAB, yeah.
Yeah. It's exactly the same
okay.
code, mostly the same code. The benefit of this one is that you don't need the instead of having this this MATLAB, I forgot the name.
Yeah, the runtime installer.
Yeah, that one you need a specific version and so on. If you have that installed and it works, you can do that. You can install this one on top of that one because it's a completely different independent branch. So you will have probably a different formula. I didn't say that, but whatever formula, whatever R formula that you have in your Excel will start with R dot.
Okay.
So even if the formula has the same structure and name, the one that you load using BERT is going to be called R dot SUTB. Exactly.
Because the one in MATLAB is just SUTB. Well, there are different versions of it. SUTB, SUTB version 1 and so on.
The one that the one that we're distributing now, it's a little improved from the previous one, and we continue improving this. But I'm not working with MATLAB anymore. So if we share new versions, and this is basically to improve the capacity, so bigger matrices, we will be loading them in the on the website that we're using.
Okay. And the website is the one that was given in the material. Is a different website.
Claudia, what's you have the link to the website where we're going to load this?
Yes, we are going to. We are not already available the website, but we are going to send you soon with all presentations and the record of the meeting. So for those that cannot attend this meeting since the beginning, or for them they want to review, to check some issues, you can do it with the record of the meeting too. Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Excellent. So if there are no more questions or comments, we can close here, and thank you all for being here today, and thank you for our presenters, speakers that were very interesting with their interesting presentations. So let's go, and thank you for being here today. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Goodbye, everyone. I'll be sending you all the information.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.